Welcome into this edition of the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski and Jim Leitner joining you after a good bounce-back weekend for the Fighting Saints. This was a team that not really accustomed to losing early on in this season, but 2 weekends ago they lost their first 2 regulation contests of the season. This weekend, right back on track with 2 victories. Tough sledding on Friday, and then I think a breath of fresh air for everyone involved with the Saints on Saturday because it wasn't a 1-goal game and it was a clean 60 minutes and they won by 4 goals. But overall, a solid weekend, and just for the Fighting Saints in general to be able to finish the homestand at 4-2, which is kind of the mark that you and I set here, Jim, on the show. That would be a really good mark for the homestand. But more so than that, to lose 2 in a row and then to come back with 2 straight wins, I think solidifies that this team is for real this season.
Well, for sure, and I think the big key is the bounce back there. You know, you have 2 really difficult losses the prior weekend where, you know, I believe they deserved to win both of those games, or you could have made a really good argument that they deserved to beat both Waterloo and Fargo, but they didn't. The hockey gods weren't smiling on them. And, you know, sometimes when that happens, you begin to question yourself, and it's a really an important thing to bounce back, have a good week of practice, and, you know, take the little things a little bit more seriously, or have a little bit more sense of urgency. And I thought they did that. You know, even though Friday night might not have been the best game of the year, they found a way, and you know, to get 2 wins and end this homestand with a 4-2 record, I think is outstanding.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily a strong start to the weekend. The first 40 minutes of Friday night's game were very tough sledding for the Fighting Saints, and I think part of that is you have to give a lot of credit to Tri-City because they played tough defensively against everyone, but it really didn't seem like the Fighting Saints were doing themselves any favors either on Friday night in terms of generating everything offensively. Then they made some lineup changes, switched up the lines. The third period, they were able to get the equalizer, once again on a power play goal, and then battled back to get that overtime victory. But it really seemed like the momentum turned when Oliver David switched up those lines, and suddenly the third period, they had their legs.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that I think last year about this time we were kind of wondering when he was going to start making adjustments, and I don't know if the Saints maybe took a little bit too long to make adjustments last year, but a lot of times what happens is teams pre-scout you, they get a really good read on you, and if they have, you know, 7-8 games in a row with the exact same line combinations, the exact same reads, it's a little bit easier to pre-scout. You know exactly what's coming. But, you know, if you make subtle changes like one guy on a line or just a couple of guys here and there, it really alters the chemistry of all the lines. And it makes it a lot more difficult for the other team to really game plan. You go into a game and you think, this is Dubuque, we got them figured out, you know, and then they throw a curveball at you. It's difficult for the other team to adjust, and they have to make a big adjustment as well. So I think that's a credit to the coaching staff and Coach Oliver David for recognizing that and making those changes in game to really throw a different look at Anthony Noreen and the Tri-City Storm, because that's a good team a good team in terms of scheming and coming up with a game plan, and I think that was a really good idea to change things up and throw a curve at them.
And Oliver referenced this on Saturday before the Lincoln game, but he said that, you know, it's a real luxury to have a goaltender like Eric Portillo, who, when your team doesn't have its best stuff offensively, when they're really struggling to figure things out, can keep you in a game through the first 40 minutes, 20 minutes, however long it takes for the offense to figure things out. He's done that a couple times this season, a couple times against Tri-City, and on Friday night it was another example of how poised he is in the net.
Yeah, and you know, there were times when Tri-City made had some nice looks at the net, and he made some spectacular acrobatic saves that kept you in it. And, you know, not only does that keep the score, you know, at 1 goal or a 1-goal differential, you know, it really pumps a lot of life into your bench. You know, when you see your goaltender out there giving everything he has, making acrobatic saves, making highlight reel saves, it gives you a little bit more momentum. It's the same as a big hit or a big goal. When your goalie's out there doing that and giving everything he's got, it makes a big difference. And, you know, you're talking about a guy who's been drafted by the Buffalo Sabres. You know, he's going to an elite college program like Michigan. You know, he's certainly living up to all the expectations that I think we had for him way back in June when the Fighting Saints drafted him, or earlier than in May when they drafted him.
Yeah, back-to-back wins for Portillo, back-to-back games, giving up just one goal. A very strong weekend for the Fighting Saints netminder. And then to end the game on Friday, the player that seems to be scoring the big goals early this season most frequently for Dubuque, and that's Reese Gaber. And I think that was a big goal, obviously, for the team to win that game. But for Gaber himself, who was really struggling during the homestand offensively, he hadn't been able to generate much. And we saw the carryover. We won't get into it quite yet because that was Saturday's game, but we saw the immediate carryover into Saturday. But a huge goal, and that's what great players do. Even if they're down for a little bit, when they get the opportunity, they're going to score the big goal.
Yeah, and I likened it to like a baseball pitcher. Sometimes you can go out there and throw a no-hitter, and it's effortless. You just go out there, you have that stuff, and no one's going to touch you on that particular day. But then I think what's even more impressive is a pitcher who goes out there and who's really struggling, but finds a way to win, or really comes up with a lot of courage, or just that little bit of extra when he's struggling. That's the sign of a really good elite athlete. And I agree with you. I don't think Reese had his best game. I think he'll be the first to tell you that he wasn't playing the way he's accustomed to playing. But he goes out and that move he made in overtime showed a lot of confidence. He needed a lot of speed, to get to the loose puck and win a race for that, and then to have the presence of mind to deke and make a beautiful backhand goal. It speaks volumes to him. But I do think with Reese, there is a little bit of that clutch gene in him. Yeah. And when the chips are down, or when it's a really a difficult situation or an important moment, he's so calm and cool in those situations, and that's what you need. You see a lot of guys who have the game on their stick, breakaway, and they kind of fold under pressure. They just can't handle the big moment. But Reese is a guy who I think he really loves that instance, and he's such a gritty, hard-working, hard-nosed kid, and that clutch gene is something that I don't even know if you can develop that. I think that's something that's inside you, and he certainly has it.
Well, he has 3 game-winning goals this season. That doesn't include the shootout goal that he scored to beat Des Moines. That's also a big... You put the puck in the back of the net, it doesn't count as a goal, but it's still a big moment there in that game, and that was the winning shot on the shootout. But he has 9 goals total, and 6 of which have come in the third period or later this season. I think that speaks to the clutch gene that you referenced. And then I spoke earlier about the carryover for Gaber. It was a carryover for the entire team into that Lincoln game. Maybe, again, a little bit of a slow start on the scoreboard, but Dubuque outshot Lincoln, I believe it was 13 or 14-6 in that first period, so they had their chances. Really, if they'd kept themselves out of the box more, they might have had another goal. And then the second period, they scored 2 goals, and then Gaber scores 2 in the third, and it's a comfortable, easy last 10 minutes for the first time in a while for the Fighting Saints.
I really liked the Saints came out the first couple minutes, they dominated, but they took kind of an undisciplined penalty that led to a power play goal for Lincoln. So they're down 1-0 in the first couple minutes of the game. But I like the way the Saints really bounced back. They got the equalizer just, a minute and a half later, or less than 2 minutes later, and from that point on, it's really seemed like Dubuque was going to be in control, and they played with a lot more confidence. They played with a lot more poise, and it was a much more wide open hockey game than we saw on Friday night. But I thought they played really well. They were really good positionally. I do think the only downfall was the penalties, which is something that we have not seen all year. We hadn't seen anything over a 2-minute minor all season, and the Saints had 2 10-minute misconducts, in the course of that game. And a 10-minute misconduct, you're not on the ice, you're not physically shorthanded, you're not 5-on-4 for the 10 minutes. But to take guys like that out, like it was Reggie Millette and Jimmy Glenn, those guys took the 10-minute misconducts. Those are important guys. And those are guys that you don't have their services for 10 minutes. And, both of those guys are aggressive players who are good on the penalty kill. And to be missing those guys was, not a very comfortable situation. But I like the way the Fighting Saints responded to the challenge, and they continue to kind of get a little bit more separation on Lincoln, and I think that was key. And Lincoln's a good team. Lincoln's a team with a really good power play, and the Fighting Saints really shut them down and earned that win on Saturday night.
The Fighting Saints essentially took a quarter of their entire penalty minutes this season in that one game. They had 128 penalty minutes right now. They took 32 penalty minutes in the game against Lincoln. So actually, my math is spot on. That is exactly a quarter of their penalty minutes in one game. See, I'm so bad at math that I don't even know when I'm good at math.
That's that Penn State degree for you. But
I didn't spend much time in math class. Even when I had a math class, I didn't spend much time in math class.
And it was funny. We went into that game thinking, geez, Lincoln's leading the league in penalties, so Dubuque's going to be on the power play all the time, and it was actually kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
But I can see how that happens. You look at a team like Lincoln, you pre-scout them, and you say, geez, they're going to take all kinds of penalties. They're chippy. There's a lot of stick fouls. There's maybe a lot of out of position, plays where they're out of position and they take a penalty, and you go into that with mindset, and you kind of think, well, geez, we're going to have to play that way too. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of a victim, or the Saints were kind of a victim of that. They kind of played the same kind of style that Lincoln has been accustomed to, and it ended up with them being in the penalty box a lot more than Lincoln and a lot more than they're used to. But again, I thought the penalty kill was outstanding other than that first one. The first one they scored, I think, 10, 15 seconds into the first power play. Mm-hmm. And but from that point on, Dubuque was really spot on the penalty kill. And I don't know that Lincoln really had any great scoring chances on the next 4 or 5 power plays. And again, that's a credit to the penalty kill and doing a good job.
Yeah, the game, it was different than a lot of Fighting Saints games this season because it wasn't close down to the wire. They scored 5 goals. It was just the second time that they scored 5 goals this season, and really the first time that they scored 5 goals, because the other time they get the extra goal because of the shootout, but again, they didn't score the goal during the game. So the first time they've really put up that many goals in one game. But what might be lost because all those things are a newer feeling is same old on the defensive side, but this might even be a better defensive effort than a lot of them because of how high-powered the offense from Lincoln was coming into the game. They were tops in the Western Conference with 53 goals scored, and this was just a tough road trip in general for Lincoln. They didn't score at all against Cedar Rapids, and they only scored 1 against Dubuque, but that really speaks to this team continuing to just be one of, if not the best defensive clubs in the league, doing so against one of the top scoring teams in the league.
Yeah, a very frustrating weekend for Lincoln. You think you come in and, Cedar Rapids has a nice team, but they're a team that's given up some goals at times too. So a tough weekend for Lincoln. But again, I think that's credit to the Fighting Saints for going out and playing the style of defense that they've become accustomed to. And when you play that kind of style of defense, you're going to give yourself a chance to win every time. Mm-hmm. Friday night's a perfect example. They didn't allow a ton of scoring chances, and Portillo played outstanding, and they ended up winning a game that a lot of people would say they didn't deserve to win.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't deserve to win that one on Friday night, but the previous weekend they probably deserved to win those 2 games, so it all comes out in the wash. But again, to your point, I thought defense was outstanding all weekend, and it starts with Portillo. The defense core, I think, has been really good, and the forwards are doing a good job of coming back and taking away angles and passing lanes and shooting lanes, and when you do that, you're going to have success.
We're running a little long here on this first segment, but we'd be remiss to not mention the fact that the 2 games this weekend were bigger than just 2 hockey games with Military Appreciation Weekend. If you were at the games or you followed along with social media, you saw the jerseys that the Saints were wearing. The 50-50 pot for the entire month, the proceeds were donated back to the Veterans Freedom Center thanks to the Fighting Saints sponsors Hodge and Run for Troops. The 50-50 pot on Saturday night got over $1,300, I believe, which is fantastic. So almost $700 going back to the Veterans Freedom Center from that 50-50 pot. And then the jersey auction that the Fighting Saints do with all the proceeds going back to the Veterans Freedom Center. We had a record, and I know you weren't here for the jersey auction, but Eric Portillo's jersey sold for $4,100. $4,100, which I don't know what the previous mark was, but it blows the previous mark out of the water for highest jersey auctioned off. And, sometimes there's not a rhyme or reason for why a jersey goes for a lot of money. I think Portillo, it's obvious. He's a fan favorite. He's a great player, but $4,100 with that jersey alone going back to a great cause is phenomenal.
And there's no question about it. And we've seen that the last 10 years, really, from this fan base. When you have a special auction like this, and it's about more than just the hockey team. It's about dedicating money to a really good cause. And I think that's what's really separated this organization from the previous incarnation of the Saints, many, many years ago. This has much more of a community feel to it, and doing things like these jersey auctions for great causes is, it's a smart move on behalf of the Saints, because it draws more people in from the community, but it's also a heartwarming thing because it's dedicating good amount of money to good causes.
Yeah, the Military Appreciation Weekend this year, fantastic as always for the Fighting Saints. Again, Friday and Saturday, some special events going on to honor the local military, and Dubuque honoring them as well with 2 victories. Again, 2-1 over Tri-City, and then 5-1, a blowout victory, which we haven't seen much of this season, but they improved to 10-2-1 on the season, the 3rd team in the USHL, now up to at least 10 wins, and the Fighting Saints continue to roll early on in the 2019-2020 season. Some other teams continuing to roll around the USHL, and that's what we'll get into after this break. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski, Jim Leitner, and as we go around the USHL, the rich keep getting richer, the good teams just continue to keep getting better. The Fighting Saints with 2 wins, they're they're winning percentage-wise the top team in the league, second best in the Eastern Conference in terms of points. The Chicago Steel are top in the league in points. They win 2 games this weekend as well. And the Waterloo Blackhawks top in the Western Conference, right there in the conversation with Dubuque and Chicago all season long as to who is the best team in the USHL. They also win their 2 games this weekend. So the cream of the crop this weekend, I think, separating themselves from the pack, just showing that, they can be dominant for multiple nights. Waterloo, and this shows how tight the league is, Waterloo beat Omaha twice, but both by identical 4-3 scores, once in overtime, once in regulation. If you're the Omaha Lancers, you go home with only 1 point, but you can't be disappointed playing at Young Arena and getting those 2 results. But Waterloo continues to roll. Chicago 6-3 over Sioux City, and then Sioux City made it really tough for them the following night, a 3-2 victory. But again, this speaks to how good these teams are, because maybe not the best stuff. We didn't watch Waterloo or Chicago, but Dubuque didn't have their best stuff all weekend. They win 2 games. I'm guessing the other teams didn't have their best stuff, judging by the scores as well, and they still win 2 games. And I think it's pretty apparent that these are going to be 3 that we talk about all season long.
I think so, and I mean, you go up and down the standings, there are a lot of really good teams in this league. Maybe a couple teams that are really struggling in Sioux Falls and Madison, but other than that, there are 14 pretty good teams in the USHL, really good teams. But I think what separates the really good teams from the teams that we mentioned, the Waterloos, the Chicagos, the Dubukes, that are, still in the single digits in losses or just 2 or 3 losses, is they find those ways to win. I look at, we talked about Dubuque not having its best game on Friday night and still winning an overtime game against Tri-City. You go back a week earlier, and I can guarantee you Waterloo didn't think it played its best game, but it came out with a win against the Fighting Saints here in Mesquite, which is a tough place to play. So I think that's what's really the difference maker, for all 3 of those teams, is they find ways to win, and they're not finding ways to lose. They're finding those ways to get that 1 extra goal than the opponent that they're playing.
And a couple teams that were, you mentioned the bottom dwellers right now in the league, a couple teams that were facing the bottom 2 teams in the league. Fargo against Madison, that's the bottom team in the East, and then Green Bay against Sioux Falls, bottom team in the West. Fargo and Green Bay, to their credit, take care of business, don't play down to their opponents. Fargo wins 7-1 and then 3-2 on Thursday and Friday. Green Bay put up 14 total goals this weekend. They beat the Sioux Falls Stampede on Saturday. It looks like they beat them 6-3, and then on Sunday it's an 8-1 victory for the Green Bay Gamblers. And Sioux Falls, tough weekend. They played 3 games and they lose all 3, and they gave up at least 5 goals in all 3 games. So the Stampede, this shows where the league is. I mean, you win the Clark Cup one year, and then you lose a lot of those key players, and suddenly you're 2-10-2, and sometimes that's just the way it shakes out with not being able to draft as high, not getting all those key players back. But when you're a team in the middle, you have to take advantage of the bottom dwellers, and Fargo and Green Bay did.
They do, and this is a league where you don't feel sorry for any of your opponents because it's a tough league to play, and you have to come out and play your best game every night. And I mean, you look at Dubuque against Madison over the last couple of years. How many of those games have been 1-goal games, and Madison always gives Dubuque fits schematically. So. You're right, though. If you have an opportunity to play one of those teams that's been down or a little bit down on its luck, you have to take advantage of it. And, even the good teams are going to go on streaks where they lose a couple in a row. And, if you're a team and you see one of those teams that's kind of limping around, you have to jump on them and really capitalize on that, on them being down a little bit.
The other team that was impressive this weekend, they started off with a 4-2 loss to the U18s, the Des Moines Buccaneers, but this was a brutal road trip, a 3-3 for Des Moines that saw them go to Plymouth on Friday, then saw them go to Muskegon on Saturday, and then all the way over to Youngstown on Sunday, and they beat Muskegon 3-1 on Saturday. They beat Youngstown 5-2 on Sunday to come away with 4 out of 6 points on a road trip that long is a good job by the Des Moines Buccaneers, a team that Dubuque will see this upcoming weekend. And they're a young team, but if they figure it out, and we've touched on it before, more so on the defensive side like it looks like they did in the last 2 games this weekend, they're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, the Buccaneers are in second place in the Western Conference, just 4 points behind Waterloo. But again, you mentioned the defensive deficiencies. Right now they've allowed 56 goals, and they've scored 60. So they've been involved in some shootout or high-scoring shootout games that really have inflated that defensive total. But again, if you figure that out, and Muskegon's a good team, and they held them to 1 goal. Youngstown has been a really explosive team, and they held the Phantoms to 2 goals. Mm-hmm. It sounds like they are kind of figuring things out a little bit more in Des Moines, and that's something that the Fighting Saints are going to have to deal with this weekend.
Looking at the standings, Waterloo in first in the West. Jim mentioned Des Moines in second, then Lincoln, even though they lost 2, still remain in the top 3. They're third. Tri-City now back at 500 for the first time this season. They're in fourth. Then it goes Fargo, Sioux City, Omaha, Sioux Falls. In the East, it's Chicago and Dubuque. Green Bay's gone on a little bit of a run here. They're now 9-6-1-1, 20 points. They're third in the Eastern Conference. Cedar Rapids and Youngstown follow closely behind, then Muskegon and Team USA. Again, the separation in both conferences between the bottom, when you look at the playoff teams at least, the top 6 make the playoffs. There's 8 points of separation between 6 and 1 in the Western Conference. And there's also 8 points of separation between 6 and 1 in the Eastern Conference. But then in the middle there, I mean, Muskegon, if they win 2 games, they're up in third place if Green Bay falters. And likewise in the Western Conference, if Fargo wins a couple, they're tied with Des Moines. So it's still very tight. The only difference is, and we just mentioned this, Waterloo, Chicago, and Dubuque have kind of separated themselves a little bit. Dubuque only is 1 point ahead of Green Bay, but they have 4 games in hand because of the light schedule to start, so you'd have to think that would increase when they play more.
Yeah, and you're really only looking at right now, you've got 7 teams in each conference that are really right in the thick of things. It's just a matter of those teams going on a little bit of a run, and they could be in first place. Mm-hmm. If things shake out the way they could. Really only Sioux Falls and Madison are the ones that are really down at the bottom, and it'll be interesting to see if they make any moves to kind of shake things up and try to get themselves back in that playoff race. But this is what the USHL has really become accustomed to, and one of the reasons why I think it's such an elite league and why it's so highly scouted is because every night is going to be a challenge, and it's not like you're going to go in and score 6 goals against a particular team automatically. You have to work for everything you get.
Well, Dubuque took on the 3rd and 4th place teams right now in the Western Conference this past weekend. They'll take on teams 1 and 2 this upcoming weekend in the Western Conference as they continue to play the majority of their schedule out of conference. And this weekend it will be on the road. We preview Waterloo on Friday and Des Moines on Saturday after this break. And we welcome you back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski and Jim Leitner taking a look ahead to the upcoming weekend for the Fighting Saints. And after 6 straight at home, it will now be 5 straight on the road for Dubuque. This weekend, Waterloo and then Des Moines, and then a 3 and 4 the following week. That'll be a tough one. Des Moines on Wednesday, Fargo on Friday, Sioux Falls on Saturday. But first, we're looking at this weekend right now, and it starts in Waterloo, and it gives the Fighting Saints a chance to get a little bit of revenge for a tough 3-2 loss against Waterloo here at the Mesquite Community Ice Center just last weekend. And then, again, 1 and 2 in the Western Conference doesn't get much easier as they travel to Des Moines the weekend after. But first, looking at that Waterloo game, same in the fact that not much has changed on these two teams in the last couple weeks. World's different in the fact that you're playing on a much bigger ice surface in Waterloo, and we know how tough that can be, especially the first time of the season.
Yeah, and that's something that we've noticed over the last several years. The first time that the Saints go into Waterloo, they always seem to have a trouble adjusting, and it might not seem like a big difference, as a fan when you're watching it, but when you're on the ice, the angles are different. Particularly, I think for a goaltender, I think it's really difficult. Shooting angles and lanes are a lot more different than what you're used to. What I'm going to be curious to see is, I'm assuming Eric Portillo will start that game in net for the Saints. He's a European goaltender, so he's played on the big sheet his entire life. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that it's a quick and easy adjustment for him, to go play on the Olympic-size ice. Maybe he might feel a little bit more comfortable than a typical goaltender is used to playing on the smaller ice surfaces. But that is a big adjustment, and it's something that has given the Fighting Saints fits and over the last few years. And it wouldn't surprise me if Waterloo doesn't want to play the Fighting Saints in preseason games because they don't want Dubuque to get a feel for that big ice sheet and gives them a little advantage when they see him in the regular season. But I don't want to plant any seeds of conspiracy between two rivals like that. That would be wrong.
Conspiracy theories are so fun. We'll create you a burner account on
there
Twitter so you can start just commenting on different posts. That's the easiest way to create conspiracy theories. We'll see if I don't know what conspiracy theories Kevin Durant might have started when he was on his Twitter burner.
I don't know.
There.
Yeah, there was a lot of them, actually. You don't see that hopefully you don't see that from a professional athlete too often, but
it's a tangent for another time. But as we move forward, looking at Des Moines, that was one of the more exciting games the Fighting Saints have been a part of. Des Moines on the road the first time this season. One of the few uncharacteristic, probably poor defensive efforts that we saw from Dubuque, giving up 4 to Des Moines. But the way they've scored this season, it was, the goal total wasn't so much the poor defensive effort as the way the Fighting Saints played structurally that game. You can give up 4 goals and still play well defensively. It looked like they were kind of chasing the puck a lot of the time. Des Moines had great possession, which we don't see often from the opponent this season against Dubuque. So it'll be interesting to see these small adjustments that each team makes. Dubuque would love to play better defensively, but Des Moines knows they have to play better defensively against the Fighting Saints. Lincoln didn't do so, gave up 5 goals. Dubuque hasn't been a juggernaut offensively, but if you give them opportunities, they will capitalize.
Oh, no doubt about it. And I think, in talking to Ty Jackson after the game Saturday night, he felt as though scoring 5 goals, gave a lot of guys a boost of confidence. They'd played in, 8 straight 1-goal games.
Yeah.
And a lot of those games were 3-2 or 2-1 or real low-scoring 1-goal games. So I think having a breakout game against a good quality team like Lincoln, hopefully that gives the Fighting Saints a little bit more confidence going into this weekend. And they're going to need it against Waterloo and then in Des Moines. And but I think it's a good sign that they're feeling good about themselves confidence-wise, especially coming off a weekend where they lost twice.
Yeah, talking to a couple guys at the end of that game or after that game, the 5-1 victory, they didn't really use the words "it was easy," but to have a comfortable feeling with 10 minutes left. And, 3-1 isn't necessarily comfortable, especially against a team like Lincoln. But I think when Gaber put in his first goal, to make it 4-1 with about 8 minutes left, I believe, at that time, that's when you really felt like, okay, this isn't going to be one of those where we're gripping our sticks tight until the final whistle. This is finally a game where we've pulled away, and, the Fighting Saints weren't on cruise control, but it was just kind of easy for them with how well they play structurally, defensively, to batten down the hatches for the last 8 minutes.
Yeah, and I thought that was important as well. I mean, we've talked a lot about the one-goal games and how much you learn from those games, but again, I think it's a good idea to have a 4-goal win every once in a while. It gives other guys confidence, and I think that's what we need. We need to see a little bit more secondary scoring out of the Fighting Saints, and we're starting to see that creep in a little bit now. It's starting to pick up a little bit, and but I think with secondary scoring, once you get that ball rolling, it can be a real snowball effect, and you can see guys that really take off. Perfect example is like Quinn Preston a few years ago. He really struggled in his first year in the USHL, and then he went on a tear. It was just a matter of getting that first one and then getting some confidence, getting comfortable with the USHL, and then you just roll. And hopefully Saturday night against Lincoln is the start of something big.
Yeah, not many. I mean, you still had the usual suspects. Ty and Dylan Jackson both scored goals. Reese Gaber had 2. Antonio Venutos, who's been the biggest secondary scorer for the Fighting Saints, got another goal. But a lot of players in on the scoring that aren't usually there. Braden Doyle, maybe the only defenseman that's been a regular on the point sheet, but Luke Robinson got his first assist of the season. Michael Feenstra got his first point of the season. And I'll be interested to see if Oliver David keeps the line combinations the way they were throughout the game on Saturday, because you had Ryan Beck playing with Reese Gaber and Stephen Halliday. And Gaber has been going all season, but Beck is one of the younger players trying to get going. Halliday hasn't been doing as well as he might have been expected to do, and you'd like to see him getting going. And then Tommy Middleton played most of the game with the Jackson twins, and though he didn't factor in on the score sheet, he did have a pretty good impact on that line. So I'll be interested to see if he keeps those lines together. And you have to imagine if a guy like Middleton plays with the Jacksons for another game, he probably gets a point. Yeah. And same for Beck playing with Halliday and Gaber. You'd like to see those guys get going, and one of the ways to do so is when you have the depth of skill that the Fighting Saints do, chop up the lines as much as you can.
Yeah, Halliday's one I think we're going to see him erupt real soon. You just look at, he really hasn't been rewarded with points, but there were times Saturday night where he was dominant, and I thought he's protecting the puck really well. His big body, 6'4", 212, doing a good job protecting the puck, taking it to the net, and then just not getting rewarded for it.
Yeah.
I think with him, it's going to be a matter, someone's going to have to shoot one in off his shin pad and, get a lucky bounce like that, and then all of a sudden it's going to give him the confidence and he's going to take off. But again, the way he's playing, I don't think he has to adjust his game at all. I think he just has to, get a little bit of puck luck, and then it's going to be off to the races for him.
His only goal of the season was scored against Des Moines on the power play, so we'll see if a familiar territory for Stephen Halliday rewards the same results. When we come back, we'll be in familiar territory as well, because it's another buy and sell NHL edition, as the NHL season now really getting into full swing. And just like in the USHL with the top couple teams separating themselves, we see the same thing in the NHL. So some buy and sell to end things here on this Monday. Welcome back to the Fighting Saints Report. Jack Milewski, Jim Leitner, one final time here on Monday evening, and now it's buy or sell NHL edition. 5 questions, you know the drill by now. I would think buying it means we're good to go. You agree with exactly what the statement means. Selling is you disagree with the entire statement, or at least part of it. Some of these are kind of two-parters in a way. So we'll start off with the most dynamic duo right now in the NHL, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, leading the Edmonton Oilers, leading the NHL in points. Draisaitl has 43. McDavid is second with 40. Buy or sell that they will finish 1-2 in either order in scoring this season?
I think they are. I'm going to buy that, and normally I would say common sense tells you should sell on that, because they're clearly the top end scorers on their team. There's a huge separation between those two guys and the rest of the scoring on their team. And at some point you would figure that teams would figure that out and they would completely game plan against it. But those two guys seem to be immune to game plans.
Yeah.
And they're putting up a huge amount of points right now. So that being said, I mean, logic tells me that I should be selling, but the way they're playing and the way they're defying logic makes me want to buy.
Yeah, there's nothing common or logical about the two of those guys, and I agree with you. I think they're immune to game plans. Right now it reminds me of how Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin tore up the league for about 10 years straight when they were younger in their careers. And Draisaitl, I think, Malkin got lost in the shadow of Crosby, but he was a top 10 player for every single season that he was with him. Now you might argue that they're not because of their advanced age. I think Crosby's still a top 10 player. Malkin maybe is on the fringe there. But Draisaitl and McDavid's very similar to me because Draisaitl is as good as anyone in the NHL right now, but he'll always be overshadowed a little bit by Connor McDavid. But I 100% buy. I think they're both 120-plus points this season, and it's just it's mind-boggling that you can know that they're the guys that are going to beat you, and they'll still beat you every night.
I saw a goal last week where it wasn't a breakaway or anything, but I can't remember who they were playing, but McDavid just used his speed to just blow by a defenseman, go in and score, create his own breakaway out of nothing.
Yep.
And it seemed like, it really kind of felt like when you watch a youth hockey game,
Yeah.
where there's that one kid who's just so much more advanced than everybody else. When you get you don't have that in the NHL.
But
you don't have guys. You shouldn't have that in the NHL where guys are that much better, that much faster, but McDavid is.
He glides faster than a lot of people skate. It's unbelievable. 2 steps
And he
and
had
he's
a big
gone.
knee injury, too.
Doesn't seem like it.
No.
Another dynamic duo, probably number 2 on the list in terms of pairings in the NHL, and that's Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak for the Boston Bruins. Right now, Pasta has 17 goals in 20 games, Marchand with 13 goals in 20 games. Do both of them get to 40-plus goals this season, buy or sell? I'm
going to sell on that. I think that's a little bit too lofty. Maybe 30, in that 30 range I see those guys going, but 40, although they're on pace for closer to 40, I see 30 as more realistic.
I think Pasta gets to 40. I don't see Marchand getting to 40. Marchand's going to be a point-per-game player, but on that line where you have Bergeron is kind of the glue, and then Pastrnak is the trigger man, Marchand is more of the playmaker. I think he just falls back into that role a little bit more. I agree, 30-plus for Marchand, but 40-plus for Pastrnak. Just 2 40-plus goal scorers on the same line is really tough to do, but they'll both be over a point per game. Looking at the top teams in the NHL right now, there are only 3 teams that have 3 regulation losses, and those are the Islanders and Capitals and the Boston Bruins. Buying or selling that at least 2 of those teams will still be under 10 regulation losses by Christmas time. And roughly that's 15 to 16 games per team.
I'm going to sell on that. The NHL is just so demanding of schedule, and everybody goes on stretches where they lose a couple in a row. So I think that's awfully hard to do. And I don't – maybe Washington might have the best chance of those 3 to be under, but I still can see them going on a stretch where they struggle a little bit and they get to that double digits.
Yeah, I sell it, but I think the Caps for sure will be under. I think they're playing at another level right now. This reminds me of those teams that ran away with the President's Trophy in December or January. I mean, it was a moot point by the time February rolled around. So I think the Capitals will be under 10 regulation losses. The Islanders are really good, but if the team doesn't get 1 or 2 goals allowed per game, they're going to lose some games. Eventually they have to fall back, and the Bruins have gone on a losing streak here in the last couple weeks, but 3 of their 4 losses have been in shootouts. So they're just losing after regulation, so I think they'll regress a little bit as well. Speaking of Boston and the Capitals, they both lead their respective divisions. The St. Louis Blues are at the top of their division, and Edmonton is at the top of the Pacific Division. Buy or sell that all 4 will still be at the top of their divisions by January 1st?
I'm going to sell on that. think St. Louis probably might have the toughest. I think that's the toughest division, so that's going to be, I think, the hardest for them to stay up there. I don't know about Boston either. Teams like Boston and St. Louis have made such long Stanley Cup runs. Obviously, both went to the finals. It's so tough to maintain that. I mean, you get off. It's possible to get off to a good start, and both of them have. But I don't see them maintaining that because it's such a long. They had such a long season last year, and it's going to start feeling really long, really soon. So I don't see either of those two. But the other two, I think they had a pretty good shot of staying up there.
I'd buy it if the Blues weren't involved. I think the Caps are going to... I think, if anything, the Caps increase their lead because, again, the Islanders are the team right below them, and I don't think the Islanders are bad. I just don't buy that they're in that same conversation as the Capitals. Really, no one in the Metro this year, in my mind, is... I buy that Boston stays up there. I don't think Tampa's going to, go on a massive run the way basically all of last season was. I think Boston's just too consistent, and they've still got good goaltending, good defense to keep them up top. I like Edmonton to stay up top because, again, right below them is Arizona. I see Arizona regressing a little bit. I see Vegas hopping up into the second spot by January 1st. But I can't bet against my Colorado Avalanche. And really, Colorado would be in first place in that division right now had two of their top three players not been taken out of the lineup, and that's Gabe Landeskog and Mikko Rantanen. They haven't played in over 2 weeks. Nathan McKinnon is really starting to pick up, and he's pushing himself into the MVP consideration, even though Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid will probably be co-winners. They already should be.
You can never go against your Colorado Avalanche.
No, I won't, because they've given me no reason to. And again, the only they right now they have the Calder Trophy winner if the season ended today, and Cale Makar. I still think that Jack Hughes and Kaapo Kakko will make pushes in the second half. They've got great defense, great goaltending, and again, I think they would have won at least 2 or 3 more games that they dropped in these last couple weeks if they had Rantanen and Landeskog back. So I think Colorado will be up there. I see the other 3 staying at the top, at least by January 1st. The Capitals show up a lot here in this buy or sell, but the last one is an individual question. Right now, John Carlson is tied for 3rd in the NHL with points. He has 32. Again, we mentioned the top 2 guys who are going to run away with it. But John Carlson has 32 points. Do you buy or sell he'll be in the top 5 in terms of points for another month?
Ooh, for another month? Yeah, I think so. I think Washington's been playing so well right now that I think he can stay there. Now, can he do it beyond another month? I highly doubt that. I could see him possibly finishing in the top 10. Maybe top 15 throughout the whole season. But, they're on a nice – they've been winning a lot of hockey games, scoring a lot of goals, so I can see him staying there for a month. But beyond that, probably not. Yeah,
the guy's right behind him. He has 32 points. McKinnon has 29. Matthews has 27. Kane has 26. I mean, those are all elite talents that are going to probably get – I think McKinnon will pass him within another month. I think Carlson probably slots in at 5, but I'll buy that he's in the top 5, and largely because it's the same reason why I buy that Alex Ovechkin would score 30 goals every season until he retires. That Capitals power play just produces points for those top guys. With Carlson at the point, if he's the guy that passes it to the near wing and Kuznetsov throws it cross ice to Ovi, or he just passes it straight to Ovi and Ovi scores the goal, you're getting assists on assists on assists with that power play.
It's nice to get points like that, secondary assists where all you have to do is you don't even have to make a nice pass. You just get rid of the puck and give it to Ovi, and it's going to be in the back of the net before you can blink.
Much like you said with McDavid and Draisaitl, you can game plan for them and you still can't stop them. It's the same thing with the Capitals power play. Ovi's going to shoot from that corner, and I've likened it a lot to Mariano Rivera's cutter in baseball. It's coming, you still can't stop it.
It's harder than Mariano's. I mean, Mariano has a little bit more control on it than a slat. I don't know how these guys have such pinpoint accuracy on these one-timers. I mean, I've kind of tried to do it, and it's so hard. I mean, obviously they work at it very hard, but there are so many variables. I don't know how they can be so accurate on one-timers as they are.
Yeah, Ovi's incredible. The Caps are off to a great start, and that's all the time we have for our show. Another good edition of NHL Buy or Sell, and hopefully another 2 good games for the Fighting Saints. There really hasn't been a bad game this season for Dubuque. Competitive in every single one. They are 10-2-1 Waterloo Friday, 7:05 puck drop. And then I believe the Des Moines game on Saturday is 6 o'clock. I think they do their Saturday games at 6:05 in Des Moines. So for the Fighting Saints, that means home a little bit earlier after the Saturday game. Interesting matchup there against the Buccaneers, and we'll see how everything shakes out for the Fighting Saints this weekend. For Jim Leitner, I'm Jack Milewski signing off. We'll talk to you next Monday.